So, as I've been trying to impart to anybody who will listen, is that the history that we've been presented, when compared to evidence, does not hold up. And we find that many of the religions that we practice today are, well, basically glorified means of control and deception. Who is the God of Abraham? Who were they worshiping when they were roaming the desert? Who led them out of Egypt? Who led them into the promised land, wielding the sword? Who was this so-called God of Abraham?
Were the high priests of the Hebrews actually worshiping this donkey god?
The high priest of the Hebrews worshiping a donkey god?
And nobody else knew about it. Only the high priest could go into the Holy of Holies, and then that was only once a year. And there's a few crazy stories about this. One of which was right around 200 BC. I want to say the guy's name is Irenaeus, but they attack the temple and he comes out with this huge golden donkey head.
All right, so that's the second temple, the so-called Temple of Solomon. First of all, look at that thing. Look at this depiction of it. Notice the two pillars in the front, as seen in the two pillars of Freemasonry. Look at the golden statues, the calves. I thought you weren't supposed to make the golden calf statue. I thought that was a no-no. That was weird. I thought Moses kind of got pissed when you guys all made that, golden calf. And then inside, you had those weird winged cherubs. Kind of look like dragons, phoenixes that you kind of built idols to. I don't know. I always thought that the God of Moses said, you should not have any other gods before me. But what, you have all these weird gods? I don't know. This is strange to me.
There was another story at a time before then of a guy that had worked his way up through the priesthood and was in charge of locking up the temple one night. And he went in to make sure nobody was around. And it was all smoky, incense filled. And all of a sudden, the golden head of a donkey appeared. Well, this completely freaked him out. Are we sitting here worshiping a donkey, guys? And he ran outside to tell everybody, and he was struck dumb and couldn't talk. One of the possible reasons for this, and I couldn't find a source on this, so this is realm of rumor, but what isn't at 3,000 years old, is that they were baking out in the desert and couldn't find any water, were about to perish, and some donkeys came along and led them to water. Yahweh had performed his miracles on the people of Egypt to the point that they were willing to give them whatever they wanted. Just go. We've had enough of you and you're Yahweh.
So that's another story. This God of Abraham and the 10 plagues of Egypt. Blood, frogs, gnats, flies, livestock, boils, hail, locusts, darkness, and then obviously the coup de grace to finish that off was the death of all the firstborn of Egypt. What are we talking about here? Why in Solomon's temple did they have only that certain priests can go in? They were all worshiping a god that almost no one knew about. What's the secrecy? What's going on here? Why are we all doing this? You have a choice to make. In these times, you have a choice to make. You're being presented with the information age. You can do one of two things with it. You can either learn from it, you can incorporate the information, and you can fearlessly face your future, knowing that in the end, you're probably not going to really know much about anything. Do you have the courage to face a future of uncertainty? Because science and religion and the government is going to tell you they have all the answers for you. They're going to give you the answer. They're going to spoon feed it to you. They're going to tell you they know why so many things are happening. They're going to tell you they know who God is. They're going to tell you that they even know who you are and who you should be. Are you going to use the information that you have available to you to challenge your preconceptions, to put your beliefs to the test and be courageous in knowing that there's going to be some answers you'll never find? Or are you going to be like almost everybody else? Just going along to get along. You have a choice. That's the amazing part of it.
I mean, if we were talking about the Buddha and I told you that he had performed these, quote, miracles on a whole nation of people and then went next door and just G-side after G-side, would you think that I'm talking about some holy man of God? No, of course not. But that's what we do with the New and Old Testament, because these guys said that that's the way it is. Universal church that eliminated every other point of view on this subject with extreme prejudice.
All right, so he makes a good point here. It's like there was a lot of point of views on who the Christ figure was, what his message was, what he stood for, what he truly preached. And this so-called universal church, i.e. the Catholic Church, well, they pretty much made it their business to make sure that any other versions of this story, any other version than the version of the story that they were promoting, that they were benefiting from, well, they made damn sure that they squashed any of those other versions. We all know about the Inquisition. So, begs the question, why should you believe in the story they gave you? Again, even when presented with overwhelming evidence to the contrary.
So, to my Christian friends that might be bothered by this in the last video I did, Christians are Christian because of what Jesus taught. I've never heard anyone ever say it's because my God's a powerful God that can smite my enemies. Jesus tells these people that are following the Mosaic laws that ye are of your father the devil, the father of all lies.
Ye are of your father the devil. He called him a pit of vipers. What is it going to take for you to realize that the Christ figure was speaking out against the God of Moses? He basically pissed all over the Sabbath, okay? Why do you think they wanted to string him up? He was walking and basically doing all kinds of things on the Sabbath. He was telling all the ones following the 613 laws of Leviticus, promoted through Moses, supposedly handed down by the God of Abraham. He was telling them all to go fuck themselves.
It is my Father that honors me, of whom you say that he is your God, but you have not known him. Now he's talking to the descendants of Abraham, and who is their God. Well, it started out as El Shaddai and El Elyon, but then in Exodus it became Yahweh forever and ever. At another time he says, you're a brood of vipers. Which, was this just an insulting thing to say, or is this actually meaning that you are the serpent seed?
What this presenter is doing is he's taking quotes, red letter quotes, out of the Christ figure's mouth. They're called the red letters in the New Testament. The words attributed to Christ. He's using these red letters to show people what the Christ figure had to say about this God of Abraham, this God of Moses, and the God that was being worshipped by the Pharisees and the Sadducees of his time. This is right. This isn't esoteric stuff. These are the words right in the four canonical gospel of Mark, Matthew, Luke, and John. And this man's simply pointing it out.
Anyway, go read your Bible again, because Jesus says the exact opposite of what Mosaic law says on everything. He goes through the list on the 10 Commandments. Yahweh told the Hebrews that they have to swear an oath to him and seal it in blood. But Jesus says, no, you don't have to swear an oath. Don't ever swear an oath. Just a simple yes or no. That's all you got to do. On animal sacrifices, he says, my Father neither desires or enjoys when you burn an animal.
He said, my Father doesn't like when you burn things. He's not into that. What are you all doing? You're crazy. Let's think of the type of being that would want consumed burnt sacrifices? Well, if it was a dragon-like being, I mean, it probably needed to consume food. Why would the Almighty God, the Father of everything, the Source, the Father of Spirit, be worried about burnt offerings? The ultimate in irony is that it appears that whoever this Christ figure was, he was a true rebel, a true sage, and a true holy man, and they co-opted his message, and they just incorporated his message into the popular zeitgeist, into the old God traditions that they had. They obscured his words, they occulted his words, and not only that, they spent 2,000 years hunting down and killing any groups that came up that opposed their particular interpretation of this Christ figure.
They say that King Solomon offered up 22,000 oxen and 122,000 sheep. But one of the first commandments Yahweh gave to Moses was you got to offer up your firstborn. But he's got a special place for donkeys because you can redeem with a lamb. You can offer up a lamb in place of a donkey. And even your firstborn sons. But it's not specific in the Bible about what that price is. There are some to this day that say that that price is 5 shekels, and they still perform this ritual. But you know, all of the so-called false gods, they demanded sacrifice from people. And this goes for pretty much all of the so-called heathen religions out there. So why is it that Yahweh wants the same thing as all of these false gods? Well, the logical answer would seem to be that he is one of the same as these false gods. Beings that apparently lived for hundreds of thousands of years used to interact with people. It wasn't a belief in them. They were just big people that lived here. And I think Yahweh was just one of the last of these beings to actually interact with humans. And from what it sounds like, he was probably one of the lesser beings, a real angry, jealous type who wanted to be worshipped as the real God. That sound like anybody you've heard of? So the Egyptians, Greeks, and Romans all knew of this evil god Seth or Set or Typhon. And wouldn't you know it, Seth.
All right, here's one of the conjectures of who this Yahweh may be. This is just one possibility.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So we're looking at the Egyptian god Seth. All right.
Mm-hmm.
Or Set is another way. Now, like I said, Moses, who's responsible for your whole darn religion, whether you're Christian, whether you're Muslim, or whether you're Jewish, it all comes down to Moses, everybody. I hate to break it to you. He's the one who apparently wrote Genesis. He apparently gave us the story of himself in Exodus. So, as I said, he was an Egyptian prince, Moses. So as such, he obviously would have been very well acquainted with the Egyptian pantheon of gods. He would have had access to all of their most holy sites of worship, all their most knowledge. The Egyptians worshipped Ra, and then they worshipped Osiris. Set was Osiris's brother, and they didn't get along. They warred with each other. So he's presenting, is it possible that because the Israelites were under Egyptian subjugation and enslavement, that maybe Seth took on the Israelites to go against his brother Osiris?
Set is an evil donkey-headed god. And like it says here, this was later applied to the Christians as the creator god. And in the Old Testament, Yahweh's never angry because of a morality issue. Like Jesus said, if you lust in your heart after someone, then you're guilty of adultery. Yahweh gets angry because of, well, like in the case of Saul, he told him to eliminate every man, woman, child, all of their livestock, all of their houses, burn their fields. And because he wasn't ruthless enough to do that, then Yahweh was angry with him. Same thing with Moses. He wasn't ruthless enough for Yahweh, so he never got to enter the promised land. And unfortunately, the promised land was already inhabited by a bunch of people. Yahweh's whole idea of giving the Hebrews this promised land was you can go smash a sword against everybody, and then it's yours. Now, the Hebrews were fleeing out of Egypt. Set is a evil donkey-headed god of the Egyptian pantheon. So some have theorized that they just started worshiping the dark god that opposed everything good in Egyptians because they really didn't like them that much. So the Egyptians used to worship Ra, and eventually he yielded power to Osiris, who had an evil brother, Set. Set was the god of war and chaos, storms, the desert. And well, what happened as soon as the Hebrews left? Nonstop wars with all of the neighboring countries. Now, there's a lot in the Old Testament about Yahweh and rain and whatnot. And it's said of him, who can understand how he spreads out the clouds and how he thunders from his pavilion? He scatters his lightning about him, and this is the way he governs the nations. He can make it rain and grow, food will grow or not rain. So there's actually a lot of boxes that get checked under them just worshiping the opposite god of what the Egyptians did. Set was jealous of his brother Osiris that ruled, for I am a jealous god, and he's usually...
So you see how he's putting the pieces together and basically saying, if we take the story of Exodus, the story of Moses, the story of the Israelites' time in Egypt, and we look at it through a different lens, what we're probably seeing is warring gods, equal in power, basically choosing certain groups of humans, certain different cultures, as their minions on earth, to worship them, to do their bidding. So after all these millennia, why should we now be worshiping, as the greater part of Western culture does, one of these particular gods? Why should we do it? Just because they gained power? Just because they were basically the rulers throughout history? Just because they were the ones hiding the knowledge in their mystery schools? And the biggest perpetrator seems to be the Church of Rome, the Roman Catholic Church. They tell us that the Roman Empire fell. The Roman Empire did not fall. It just turned into the Church of Rome. It's been wielding power from the shadows now. They got smart. They gave us governments, all right? They gave us multinational corporations. They're puppeteering their control through a minion class as they rule from the darkness.